All right. So good evening. Thanks everybody for joining. This is the first meeting of the Norfolk School Building Committee. And we are going to start just with welcome and introductions and would move to election of a chair of the committee. So why don't we start with you, Troy, if you want to just introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
I am Troy Randall, a partner at AI3 Architects, working with you all.
Great.
I'm Grace Lockhead. I am a member of the school committee, and I think that's about it. I'm a lot of other things, but as far as this committee, that's all I am.
I am Medora Champagne. I'm also a member of the school committee. I have been the chair of the committee for 2 years. January feels like it's been 5 years. So about 2 years, yeah.
I'm Ingrid Olardi. I'm the superintendent in Norfolk. Justin Casanova Davis, the town administrator, is not able to join us, but will be serving on the committee.
I'm Mike Lucarello, I guess a volunteer member of the committee.
Great.
Jason Whalen, another volunteer member of the committee.
Great. And we have a third member who is stuck on a train and hopefully will be arriving. So what I would suggest, this committee will operate, we have a particular scope. It is to update our demographic study and to work with AI3 on alternate potential building designs with modular solutions and to cost those out. We will need to elect a chair who is going to lead the meetings, but I'm suggesting, since Justin's not here and we have Mike on the train, maybe we push that item to the end of the agenda, hoping he can join us, and then we can elect the chair. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, great.
As long as you continue to serve as the
I will moderate in the interim. So because this is a new committee and we are starting in an unusual place, we have done a lot of work and looking at enrollment patterns, and we've had funding from the town to do preliminary feasibility studies and an expanded feasibility study. We thought it would help the committee to start just with a project history so you can know what's been done to date. And then, so Troy is here to kind of go over the project history. Then we have several items on the agenda today. After the project history, one of our first orders of business is going to be to appoint a new firm to conduct a second demographic study to provide us with updated projections. So we have a comparison point, and then we'll talk about potentially doing some in-district studies. So we'll start with Troy, and feel free if you have questions along the way, we can stop and ask them as we go, if that's okay with you, Troy.
Fantastic. If Ingrid, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate at all on the
Sure.
the history before we, because you
Before
guys did a lot of work before we even arrived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So on the right hand of the slide, and you also have it in your packet, we started with concerns around educational space back in 2017. There's a significant amount of building and development happening in Norfolk, quite a few 40B projects that were pending and in place, and we were pretty tight in space back then at H. Olive Day School. So the first thing that we did was to work with the town. At the time, it was Jack Hathaway, who was the town administrator, and we formed a space study committee that had both school and town representation. So the rec director was on it, Bob Bullock was on it, we had representatives from the school as well as Jack. And at that fall town meeting, we looked at potential ways of managing this space study. We looked at modular solutions, we looked at a potential third site, early childhood center, and we looked at an expansion project. In 2017, we went to the town meeting in the fall and requested funding to explore the idea of an expansion project, because that at the time seemed the most fiscally conservative route to go for the demand that we were anticipating. So we did a preliminary, which was really more of a conceptual study. The Freeman Kennedy School was built, and the architects that designed it submitted it to MSBA as a model project. When you have a model project, the building had to have a plan for potential expansion to make it usable by other districts who might be going through MSBA. So there was always, this building was designed for Norfolk as is, but the model has a potential expansion by connecting the two wings in the back. So we explored that first on a conceptual design level to see, knowing what we're expecting to see for new enrollment, could we fit enough classrooms in that space? So it was a very small scale, I think it was a $10,000 study. After we looked at the conceptual design, it was clear that that space could accommodate the needs that we were anticipating. So we moved forward. We hired a demographer that did initial enrollment projections for us. We presented that to the school committee in 2018 with the conceptual design for an expansion at Freeman Kennedy. We updated the enrollment projections again through NESDEC in 2019, and then made a presentation to the select board for the recommended solution, which was the expansion of the Freeman Kennedy. We tried for 3 consecutive years to submit to, it's called a Statement of Interest to the Mass School Building Authority to secure funding to support this project. MSBA has funded the H. Olive Day roof and the initial construction of the Freeman Kennedy. When you partner with MSBA, we've had about a 50% reimbursement rate of cost, so they cost shared. So it was really worth pursuing. However, as you know, during that period of time, we had a global pandemic. Schools across the Commonwealth had significant issues with ventilation, AC, HVAC systems. MSBA was prioritizing schools that had what they considered critical needs. So we were declined for all 3 of those years. And given state funding right now, they're really only doing urgent critical situations. So they are not considering participating with us. After 3 years, we talked to MSBA and said, what's the likelihood if we apply again? And they said, given that 50% of the schools are in Massachusetts, I think, are over 70 years old. Is that correct?
Yeah, much, yeah, yes.
Higher numbers.
Yeah.
Were not going to be a priority. So after that, we decided that we would try to see what it would look like to move forward, at least with a full feasibility study on our own. We went to fall town meeting, the town voted and appropriated funding, and we worked with AI3 for the last 18 months on a full-scale feasibility study. And again, based on the updated enrollment demographic study that we just completed last May to check to see if we were still on track. So I'll let you walk through kind of what you guys looked at, and then we'll talk about where we are now.
That's great. Thank you very much. And also, Medora, Ingrid, if you guys, since you were part of the process, if there's something you want to interject or say as I'm going through this, feel free to speak up. As Ingrid mentioned, we were hired in fall of 2022 to study the expansion project, looking at the project holistically, looking at HOD and Freeman Kennedy, and the renovation to a portion of this building, as well as expansion of the project in the back. We'll get into the detail of exactly what that looks like in a few minutes. This is showing the last several months of the discussions, the integrated working group meetings, school committee meetings, as well as meetings that we had, community forums. This is actually the community forum presentation from back in April, summarizing the process. And the educational program updates, floor plan, site plan, utility review. We'll go through that information. That was the agenda for the last community forum that we went through. The beginning portion of the feasibility study included educational visioning and educational programming. And what that did was expand the prior view and discussions that occurred related to just adding classrooms to the back of this building, and looked at the program holistically, looked at HOD, looked at Freeman Kennedy, and all the programs to identify not only what the addition would be, but how would we reorganize program within this building that's completely necessary, that as part of the space challenges with the rising enrollment and program space adjustments was needed or taken away as part of the adjustments over the last 10 years or so. The educational...
So I'll just jump on that.
Yes.
So what he's referring to is because enrollment has grown, we have another 100 kids than we had 10 years ago at HOD. We've lost spaces. So like we don't have a music room. We didn't have, we lost the computer lab. The science lab here is now a classroom. So in this, they also looked at how do we regain those critical educational spaces we need.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And we looked specifically at the early childhood, art, tech, STEAM integration of spaces, general classroom, teacher planning, and special education as part of that educational visioning, looking at the curriculum, the instruction, learning environment, and how we could create spaces that are authentic, engaging learning spaces. And so that was part of the process. That ultimately culminated into a space program that I'll get into in just a moment, and identifying exactly what spaces, square footages, and then ultimately locations. But part of the process was identifying what the actual need is and what the actual enrollment was at the time. And the enrollment projections, you can see 2026, 2027, identifying that as a target. The pre-K to 2 and then K to 2, 3 to 6, with 3 to 6 obviously is Freeman Kennedy, K to 2 is the HOD, and then pre-K to 2 is the current HOD with pre-K included. You can see on the right-hand side, we extrapolated that information, and the difference between the K to 2 and the pre-K to 2 is 64 students. We know that there's about 60, or there was at the time about 60 students that were on the wait list. So it was identified as approximately 105. The enrollment of pre-K would be about 105 in lieu of the total of 124, knowing that we're trying to right size. We're trying to be responsible in the assessment of what was appropriate at the time for pre-K, number of pre-K classes within the addition. And so 105 was the target number. That means that there would be a few students remaining on the wait list, but significantly reduced as part of the process. And then as far as grade K to 2, 461, and then grades 3 to 6, 688. This is the space summary, which is a tabulation. You'll see there are 3 columns broken out into the continuation of this to this for the total. As we went through the educational visioning process, the evolution of that results in exact spaces, the exact square footage, and the quantity of spaces that's identified within either the new addition or as part of a reorganization and renovation of the existing spaces within this building. And so it's broken out into core academic spaces, dining, food service, special education, art, music, medical, administration guidance, custodial maintenance, and other. I won't go through each of these spaces, but it culminates in the reorganization of some of the existing spaces, addition, totaling a net square footage of 25,000 square feet and a gross square footage of just over 36,000 square feet for the population that we just went through for pre-K, as well as some of the spaces here in this building. This is the preliminary floor plan where you can see the existing building here with the 2 wings here and here, and then the expanded scope with an addition connecting the corridors on either side. And as Ingrid mentioned, the square footage, the addition, as well as the spaces that were reorganized, really are identified as 3 components. They're either previously lost as part of the increase in enrollment, pre-K moving from HOD to the Freeman Kennedy, so that would take the pre-K classrooms and program from HOD to this building. And then new program to accommodate enrollment projections. So the increase in enrollment projections based on the prior numbers, that's how we got to the place where we would have pre-K on the first floor and entry, separate entry on the first floor. And then the reorganization of classrooms with ELL, with general ed, 5 fifth grade classrooms, special education with the global development program, and then reorganization of some smaller spaces within that with adjustment counselor office and SPED OT office as well. And the spaces that are identified in green are existing spaces that either are renamed as a space and/or slightly renovated as part of the reorganization of the program. And you can see on the second floor, because the addition is a two-story wing, that this would include classrooms for third grade as well as sixth grade, and 5-6 global development, art classroom, makerspace, STEAM classroom, and some other spaces, administrative spaces in that addition. And then, as you can see, just like the first floor, it reorganizes spaces to strategically place in appropriate locations the specialists, math, reading specialists, and SEL, special education, and psychology, psychologists, workers, social workers, and speech classrooms on the second floor.
So I just want to jump in a little bit for there. So I should have said up front, what we were trying to do when we looked at enrollment and we looked at a building expansion project, we have a space problem in 2 buildings. We're out of space at HOD right now, and we have no capacity. Like I said, we don't have a computer lab, we don't have a art room, didn't have a music room last year. We have no capacity to bring in the new students, so we have a space shortage there, and we will be out of space next year at Freeman. The greatest growth is expected to happen at Freeman, so we're looking at 140 more students coming into Freeman. What we wanted to do was try to solve this problem in both buildings in one addition, so that we weren't doing 2 major projects. So in doing that, we looked at moving the preschool program to the Freeman Kennedy as a separate early childhood center. One of the reasons we did that rather than looking at moving grade 2 up is this building has capacity limits for our lunch program and our cafeteria and for our gymnasium and for all of our special subject areas like art, music, and our preschool students don't access those. So moving them up didn't really impose hardship on the other structures within this building. We couldn't move grade 2 up because we can't get that many kids through the lunchroom. So that's why we have preschool on the first floor. Moving preschool over, we currently have 5 preschool classrooms. With the projected growth, we think we're going to need probably at least 7 over the next 10 years. And so that's where that number, we have 71 families on the wait list currently, and we have 5 classrooms. We know there's no way we can bring all the kids in, but we are required to provide programming for students as of their 3rd birthday who have special educational needs, and we have to keep a ratio of typical peers to special ed students. So if we get 10 more students, that's probably 2 more pre-K classrooms. So we plan for 7, and then looking at the 140 students we are expecting at Freeman, we plan for 7 additional classrooms at the Freeman. So the idea was 1 addition would accommodate and the long-term needs at both buildings. And when we're talking reorganization, you see the art room and the makerspace in the addition. Those are existing spaces now. So we have the makerspace that's right out that door. The art room, it makes sense to move those and put grade level classrooms so that all of grade 1s together, all of grade 6s together, all of grade 4s, rather than having an art room and putting a classroom on the wing. So that's where the shuffling goes.
Yeah, that does help significantly create 3rd grade, 5th grade, 4th grade, 6th grade
Right.
Arrangement and organization. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. So looking at that from the exterior, you can see the existing building here and then the addition here. The intention here is to completely separate the arrival, drop-off, pickup of the early childhood spaces, as well as creating sensory play, pre-K play, just off of and easily accessible from the addition on the first floor, and then reorganizing and improving the courtyard as part of the project. And we talked about possibilities of integration into the educational curriculum as well as outdoor space. And we'd need, as part of the process, to continue and maintain the bioretention area for stormwater drainage within that zone. This images on the left just give you an idea of concept and some of the aspects of the sensory play and pre-K play zones. So as part of the evaluation, our engineers took a look at the utilities, and you can see the existing building here with the courtyard and the addition outlined in red. Well, that means that the leaching, some of the storm drainage actually is underneath the potential new building. Utilities running with electrical, with storm, with power, and some of the water as well. So they were looking at what the impact is with an addition or some sort of a structure in that area. And so this just shows some of the conceptual alterations that would need to occur with drain manholes, with electrical lines, water lines going around the perimeter, and also use of additional bioretention, and then moving the underground infiltration system that we saw in the last diagram, moving that to the natural location, which is underneath the parking area as part of the storm drainage infiltration. And then connecting those utilities and services in the existing zone along the main entry road. And as part of the septic system, the engineers preliminarily took a look at the existing leaching field, which is located in the parking area to the east of the building. And what would need to be is 5 additional rows of expanded chambers within the existing leaching field. So it's just a diagram showing some of the things that would connect into, whether it's a septic tank, the chamber tank, and then additional chambers related to that system. You can see how conceptually they tie in here, and then 5 located chambers in that area with conceptual existing design flow, proposed design flow. In addition to utilities, our traffic engineers took a look at various key intersections along Boardman Street here, as well as along Rockwood Road 115, and the intersections coming in to the site, as well as the main roundabout here and intersection along Main Street there. As part of the process, they went through, did some data collections as far as traffic counts, looked at crash data from the police department, speed studies, observations themselves on arrival and dismissal. And there's about a 153-page document. If you want it, we can send it to you, I'm sure. That it'd be easy reading. What's that?
It's riveting.
Yeah, right. To take a look at all the data and information. As I mentioned, looking at drop-off observations as well as pickup observations. And as far as the conclusions, there's definitely adequate parking and queuing space to accommodate the expansion. There was all of the crash data. There was low incidence of crash incidents, low incidence of crashes within the area. And then as far as, there's one zone which on the upper right-hand side, this third item on the northeast driveway along Boardman, that second drive where the road turns pretty quickly after the entrance exit, having additional signage, suggested some additional signage in that area to improve and alert the any drivers in that zone. And then there's, as far as the information related to expected delays or changes, there would be minor adjustments to the no build, meaning current existing, and then the build option. This, based on alterations that would be studied in this coming phase, we would anticipate this getting updated, our engineers to update this as part of the process. And then one of the things that we reported to as part of the community forum was looking at cost and projected cost, as well as the estimates for the addition. And you probably saw it in your package. This graph here is taken directly from the Massachusetts School Building Department or Building Authority's website, and it's an interactive map. They've been collecting construction cost data for the past decade plus, and for school projects specifically. So this, you can go into each of these nodes, identify or select it, and it'll identify the project, it'll identify the estimated cost per square foot, and give you some data related to the project. So this is a good reference because it shows historically the average construction cost for new construction and renovated costs for schools within the Commonwealth. And one of the things that with the estimating that we'll show in just a second is building construction, site work, phasing. All this is broken out into the cost data information that PM&C, our consultant, our cost estimating consultant, puts together with the feasibility study estimate. And they have their pulse on the market all the time. They're not only our estimators, they're estimators for many other designers and OPMs, owners for public municipal buildings, schools, and other public buildings within the Commonwealth. So they have a really good handle on what's happening in the market. And as far as the estimate for the 36,000 plus square foot addition and partial renovation, it was between the estimated construction cost was about $26.4 to $29 million, and then extrapolating the total project cost based on a percentage was about $33 to $36 million for the scope identified. And we can go, if there are any questions related to that, we certainly take a look. This is showing what the, at the time of last year, what the estimated or approximate average construction cost per square foot for identified by the MSBA was about $775 a square foot for new construction projects. And you can see the estimate for the 36 roughly $1 million was about $727 a square foot. So well below the average that was identified last year. And the cost, whoops, wrong direction. The costs per square foot now are roughly $750 to $800, so they're stable. They're within that same range. So something we'll certainly talk about in the coming months. And this was just a timeline based on last fall in looking at potential town meeting vote, 2 town meeting votes, and potential construction phase. And that is it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm assuming your mic?
I did, yes. Apologies.
No, that's no problem. I just wanted to welcome you. Do you want to come join us? So, because we're filming the discussion for the public, so. Great. So, before we get into questions for Troy, one of the this was the feasibility study we did for the expansion project that we had originally proposed to the town. Again, looking for a single solution for space issues at 2 buildings that would also allow for, that would be sufficient to maintain any future growth. As also included in your packet, you have enrollment projection data. So I just wanted to walk through that and kind of explain how we got to where we are now. So prior to the feasibility study, the initial conceptual design and the full-scale feasibility study, we contracted with NESDEC to conduct a demographic study of the district. You can, if you are interested in the history, that presentation is on the website, and we presented to the select board. NESDEC, so on Exhibit 3, you can see on the left side of the document, these are the NESDEC projections. So we had the first study done in 2018, so you don't have a projection because they just reported the actual. That was the first year. They projected, so at that time we had 893 students between the 2 schools. This is K to 6, it's not including preschool. Okay? The reason we didn't include preschool is preschool enrollment is capped by space. So we have 70 kids on the wait list. If we had more space, we'd bring more students in. So we wanted to look at just the K to 6 program numbers. So when you look at it, we had 893 in 2018-19. NESDEC projected we'd go up to 916 in 1920. We were at 913, so pretty close in year 1. Year 2, they were projecting 965. Our actual enrollment was 935. What I want to point out here is we during that time, as I'm sure you're all well aware, we hit the COVID pandemic. Okay, so schools closed, we had students at home. From 2021 to the current year, NESDEC projections have been higher than what we've actually seen. So we had them update the study in 21-22. So you see it started at 972. They projected 1,009 in 23. So the projections started to get higher than what the actuals were, which was what generated concern around, do we need the building that we designed? Do we need that much space? What I also want to show, though, and this is where we need to really think about a new demography study, is because we can't really speak to or understand the impact of the COVID pandemic and the current climate on enrollment, because NESDEC was not off in projecting the number of students and school-age children that would be in Norfolk. What we saw since the COVID years is dramatically different than what we've seen in the past 10 years I've been here. So if you look to the right, when they projected if you're looking at 2021, they were projecting we'd have 965. We had 935. But on the right, we had 27 more students come to Norfolk that either chose homeschooling or private school. So if you put the 27 students, if those students had enrolled, we'd be pretty close to the projections. And that trend continued. So the following year, we had 26 more students homeschooling. We had 54 more students in 22-23. So the number of school-age children has really matched the projections from NESDEC. However, it's actually exceeded them. But we have a new trend that is happening nationally with more students homeschooling or choosing private education. We don't know whether that's going to sustain. We actually saw a little attrition of that, more kids coming back this year. So we don't really know if all of those children in Norfolk have a right to attend the Norfolk schools. If the economy changes and people bring their kids back from private school, we don't have anywhere to put those kids right now. So that's part of the crunch. But we really want to build, and I think the school committee has been really committed, we want to build to meet need. Nobody wants to build a building with extra space. So during the advisory board meetings and conversations this spring, we decided, the town had asked, have we looked at modular units? Originally, in multiple phases, we had priced those out based on the projections we had, and it didn't look like we were going to see any cost savings. So the prior committees had ruled that option out, but given that you just built a fire station in town and there's high inflation, we were asked to relook at those potential options. We also want to redo the projection studies to see if we can get any better clarity on what this trend might look like going forward, to make sure that whatever solution this committee chooses to put forward is going to be aligned with what the demand in town will be. So the task of this committee is to work with AI3 to look at modular options, to redo the demographic studies, to relook at this proposal, and then to make a final recommendation, what's the best solution for the town going forward. Does that make sense? Any questions for Troy on what he presented? The full feasibility study report is on our website. I'm happy to get a hard copy if anybody wants to look at it, because it was much more detailed than what we provided tonight. And it is one of the potential solutions we may have to consider, depending on what we get from data. But any questions on projections or for Troy on the work that AI3 has done so far?
Sorry. Curious, how flexible are some of the classrooms that you're adding? So for instance, if this trend continues and more people go into private school or whatever, could some of those rooms be reused into maybe to expand the preschool or something, or the preschool options? Like, because I saw in there you have like an art thing with a kiln and stuff. Like, could we move stuff around? Is it all modular to some degree in the building? I mean, or is it like once it's an art room forever?
The art room's hard to move because it is vented with the kiln. It needs different, but we have an existing art room with a kiln right now.
Sure.
It's just in the middle of a wing, which would make more sense to have like if it's in the middle of the grade 5 wing. So
if the design allows for a shock up or down in students is kind of what I'm getting at.
I think there's a lot of options. If you ended up with any open space, yes, we're only planning for 7 preschool classrooms. That's not going to meet the demand of the town. It's what we think is reasonable that we could potentially provide in staff for kids that we're required to provide programming for. So yes, if you had additional classrooms, the town could consider that. We also have space in the building now that's used by the rec department for other programming. Prior to this, we had, and I've used it in other districts, we've rented space to the collaborative that we're a member of for specialized programming, which saves so collaboratives provide programming for students with high special educational needs that you maybe can't provide for in the district. And all of those collaborators, we're a member of BICO. All of those classrooms for the BICO Collaborative are housed in public schools within the region. So in some places, if there's an extra room, you rent and you bring in revenue, but you also save if you have any students placed in that program on transportation costs and other things. So yes, there's ways you could reuse or repurpose spaces. I think our goal would be to try to build to what we really think is the best estimate of need. But yes, there's always flexible options for what we could potentially do if there was an open classroom. So
I would add a couple of points. Is one, you guys have done an incredible job using spaces and being creative about science spaces that are now classrooms.
Yes.
And flexible space, or spaces that have become flexible because of the need.
Right.
And as far as designing new spaces, one of the things that we want to make sure is instilled is that they are flexible spaces. They're designed with less built-ins, less physical built-in storage, more furniture-based, movable furniture, so that they can be flexible. Same with the early education. Try not to build out the spaces significantly, but use furniture to create subspaces and have the ability to move things around. It's much better design than trying to be too specific on the exact space.
Thank you.
One option, too, as we're looking at this, if the new enrollment projections look like we're going to see fewer kids, the other thing that we talked about is looking at modifying scope of this project. Could it be smaller? Could it be adjusted?
Just curious, in terms of construction costs, does that integrate financing cost or cost of financing for the project? And I guess is that average square footage, does that integrate cost of financing?
No, that is purely construction cost, and then the extended soft costs related to the total project costs would not have financing or borrowing interest incurred there. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, the additional soft costs are furniture, technology,
Soft costs, furniture, technology, architectural, engineering fees, legal fees, contingencies during construction, things of that nature, yeah.
Have you guys had a chance to assess the tax impact based on the current population for this project?
We've done a couple of studies. I'd have to have the town finance director come back and bring that. We were preparing that as we were looking at moving this forward. However, because we don't have a solution we're bringing yet and things are changing, we haven't brought that out publicly, but I'm happy to have Todd come and talk to that. I don't want to misquote, but I'm not 100% sure.
Don't misquote.
Yeah, I don't want to put the wrong number out there.
Don't bring anybody
Yeah,
else, please.
yeah. So I think we did look at that, and whatever solution that we finalize and want to move forward, we will have to, I think, for the public, be able to say this is what the dollar is going to, what it's going to look like on your tax base. I think what we were proposing at the time, and again, we talked about doing this new demographic study we originally wanted to do the updated demographic study at the same time as we were beginning schematic design, because we don't want to lose time and be forced to go with a temporary solution that's kind of flushing money for the town. Like we talked about other districts that have added for $1.5 million a temporary, modular classroom per year. We were trying to do it concurrently. But I think once we have the final solution, we would have to do the estimated tax impact.
And those numbers would include the borrowing costs?
Yes, yeah, they do, yeah.
With the is it typically leased or purchased, the modular buildings?
That'll be part of the discussion, for sure, and we'll be looking at both. So it's going to be completely up to you guys as part of the evaluation, yeah.
So you can price them out both ways. Any other questions for Troy? Again, just wanted people to know kind of what's been done and what we've looked at before we start with our charge moving forward of looking at modular designs, updating the demographic study, and then coming back together to kind of vet what solution's the most effective. Any other? Are we good?
I don't have any questions, but just kind of to round out the history of everything. I don't know how closely everyone follows school committee meetings. I know they're amazing and entertaining, but just...
Andrew does.
So Andrew does. Andrew is our stalwart videographer. But the school committee has, at any given point, 5 elected members, and the committee has been tasked with kind of shepherding this through since 2017. There are only 2 current members on the school committee, myself and one other member, who have been kind of involved in this project, and that's only been since 2018. So this has seen a number of other diligent elected volunteers of various backgrounds and interests and involvement or non-involvement, actually, in kind of the greater school community. Some people have students, some don't, some have kids who have matriculated out of the system, to kind of come through and review this process as it's been going on. So I just, I wanted to be clear that we've had multiple sets of competent eyes kind of shepherding this through. My own are competent, I guess, through the process and spirited debate but general consensus, I think, on what we're trying to do and the recognition of the need. So just to sort of footnote the history here. That's all.
Thank you. All right, Mike, we did introductions before you got here, but we'll do them quick again, just so you know who's at the table. Is that okay?
Yes, sorry.
All right. You want to start? We'll go the other way.
Jason Whalen? Nice
to meet you, Jason.
Mike Grillo.
Ingrid Alardi, Superintendent.
I'm Medora Champagne, School Committee.
And Grace Lockhead, School Committee.
Nice to meet you, Grace. Mike Ryan.
And I'm Troy Randall from AI3, the architect.
All right. So now that we've kind of talked about the history again, and I've kind of talked about where we were with the NASDAQ projections and the actuals. One of the things that we wanted to do was to get a new set of eyes and a new demographic study done and new enrollment projections put forward. So over, I would say, mid-December, I sent out inquiries to the Mass Superintendent's listserv to see who has had successful experiences with different demography firms. I sent broad guidelines out to over 8, I think it was 9 different firms. We only got back 2 proposals. There were, one firm is not taking new clients. 2 said that they could not do this in a, they're booked through like late spring. They couldn't even start. But a couple said that they didn't think that they would be able to add anything from what NESIC had done, that they really don't have the resources to look at the new trends, and they're very unpredictable. So we have 2 proposals that came forward. One, they're both included in your packet, I thought we could look at tonight. I think if we can make a recommendation and think about hiring a demographer, we can at least get this ball rolling and get things started. The first proposal we received, and Troy, feel free to weigh in if you've worked with any of these groups before, but came through from Demographic Analytics Advisors. And that is a company out of Virginia. I think if you look at the project schedule, they're suggesting 3 to 4 weeks to do the updated enrollment projections, another 8 to 10 weeks to do the housing and development analysis. Enrollment projections at 5,000, and the housing and development analysis another 11,000, so about 16,700 all in. You can see what would be included in the all of the report, the data that they would be seeking, the student yields, what would, I'm sure you've had a chance to take a look, the proposed scope of services, and then they give you a list of some sample clients. I did reach out, they have done, this is the group that has done some work in Wellesley, so I spoke with the superintendent from Wellesley. He has had them do quite a few projections. They bring them in every couple of years to update. They've been very happy with the performance and the data that's been provided. They have worked with, I think her name is Tracy Healy, has been the one that's done the bulk of the work in Wellesley. I think they have one other, I think they've done Chelmsford, their other Mass client. So I don't know if anything stood out in that proposal, or if anybody had the second proposal we received was from a demographer. I've been communicating with Ron Provost. So of all of the demographer, or when I sent the request out to the superintendent's listserv, I got quite a few responses. The majority of people recommended McKibben. I think you've worked with them, Troy. I spoke with Jerry McKibben, and unfortunately, they're one of the firms that can't take on anything until like late spring. He highly recommended the second firm, which is Ron Provost, who I've been working with. So both firms come highly recommended, have been, I can get further references if people want them, but they both come highly recommended. And the scope of services are similar between the two. I think the price, the timeline from the second was a little bit shorter. They have a 6-week projected timeline, I believe. And then the cost for that one, sorry, with it copied back to back, it's hard to find the spots. It's pretty similar. I think it's slightly shorter timeline as, 15,000 plus additional 500 for each in-person briefing, so presentation. So it's going to net out pretty close. So open to discussion, deliberation, thoughts, questions.
I like the commitment to the fast turnaround time.
And that's in the second firm.
Yes.
Were you able to speak with anybody that has worked with the second firm? Like, I like the fact that the first one has the Wellesley.
Yeah, I asked him for some additional references, but I did speak to McKibben, who worked with him.
Okay.
And recommended him, and he is, again, almost the majority of schools that responded recommended him. So happy to get further information. They've done a lot of work out of state as well.
Yeah, I like Massachusetts just because, I don't know, we like to think we're unique here.
Have you worked with either of these firms, Troy?
No, we haven't. We haven't.
We're both able to, I mean, assuming we selected a demographer tonight, were they committed to starting
In a timely way.
immediately? Yeah.
They indicated they would.
Right.
Can I ask a question just on how this is done mechanically? And Troy, it might be for you, I'm not sure. But, so the enrollment projections are just based on our current town footprint? Is that?
Current, I think they also look at birth rate, census data, housing sales, those kinds of
The
things.
development is like, you know, I think about Lawrence Street, and there's a huge development
That's going to be in the
there.
student field second portion
So
of
that, they add that or overlay that? Because I was driving by that the other day, and I thought, oh, good, I'm glad we have this meeting coming up, because this thing's a monster.
Yeah, I think the enrollment projections are going to look at immediate enrollment
Okay.
and like things that are on the market now. And then student fields will look at like developments that are coming
The fact that they
online
have
in the
like
future.
X number of new homes, which would
Yeah. And NESIC did do that too, and that's why they always say enrollment projections are most accurate in the first 5 years, because they will only consider projects that have been started.
Okay.
Because projects change scope as they get built, or units. So I think the yields, the enrollment projections will probably be based on like local conditions, current conditions,
Yep.
and then the long-term demographic study will look at like those projects that are in development now, what the impact would be.
Okay, so that's an additional kind of gray that they add on top
Yep.
to say, okay.
Was there any insight or into whether one firm over another would be able to kind of integrate and assess some of the trends that we've seen, you know, with homeschool or private?
Yeah, I haven't heard specifically from these two firms on that, although I have talked to a couple of people that declined to bid. Everybody has said this is a brand-new trend, and they're not going to promise that they can speak to it. They're not sure. You know, they can't. I think the election has a role in this, like the economy has a role. What I am going to suggest is, outside of whichever demographer we go with, that we consider in the short term doing an in-district study where we would reach out to all of the families that we have that are either homeschooling now or privately enrolled, and try to understand better why they chose to go out of the district, whether they intend to return to the district. So we might have to do our own internal study. I think both of these will be able to give a little bit broad national data, but they're not, nobody's confident that they can speak to how the trends are going to
Yeah.
continue going forward.
Yeah,
I
that
think
makes
it's a
sense.
lot.
The only reason I ask is I'm curious as to whether there's a kind of a sense of trends, a dispersion between the different grades in terms of homeschooling versus private, you know.
Yeah, I think in the demographic data that I mean, in the enrollment data on the second page, I gave a breakdown, I think, by, yeah. It really doesn't look like it's concentrated in one day. So the next page will show you the breakdown by grade and age for homeschool or private. It's pretty much, I mean, there's a concentration in a couple of years in grade 3, but it's pretty evenly distributed. There's fewer in kindergarten. We have fewer kids in kindergarten, but then in 2023, we had 20 kindergarten. So there isn't that I could discern a real true
Those might be
pattern.
younger siblings of grade 3.
I mean, you would think that there would be an uptick in grade 6, because a lot of the private schools start at grade 6, but you don't see that here.
No, it's pretty flat.
Well, and grade 3 this year was kindergarten?
They were COVID kindergarten.
COVID
'cause that's
kindergartners,
Connor.
the year that we had to,
Yep.
I mean, as from the standpoint of space constraints touching the school district, in that year, we could no longer offer full-day kindergarten because we didn't have the space to do it with social distancing, so
Yeah.
that particular cohort of students
So you saw
learned to
10
read
kids
on
go
an
out in that year in 2020,
They're a special group, I'll
2021.
tell you.
Grace has one.
And obviously, 10 years is kind of like, I mean, you said 5 years is basically more accurate.
It's the most
The
accurate.
farther out you go, obviously, it's going to get sketchier. But I'm kind of curious if it's like, you know, I think it'd be a tragedy to get 10 years out and all of a sudden they're like, oh, actually, there's another huge shift. I mean, it gets, but that's kind of what I was getting at, like the flexibility in the classrooms. Because if there
Yeah.
was a massive change up in,
We could
11
flex,
years,
yeah.
keep coming back to the town on these 30-year, paying for these projects over 30 years and keep
Yeah.
going back to them, that'd be not great either.
Right. And then the next page in here just shows you the growth that we've seen from 2012. So we have 117 more kids at HOD now than we had in 2012, which is why we're out of space there. Freeman has been up and down, but again, the projections are now suggesting HOD is probably going to they will see some more growth, but they've seen a lot of the growth they're going to get already, but now those higher grades are rolling up to Freeman. And we're seeing more new summer enrollment in Freeman than we ever have either. It used to be that you saw all your new kids coming in at kindergarten or grade 1. We enrolled a substantial number of kids at Freeman last summer, so.
Just like people who moved into the town and
Yep, moved into the
transferred
town or,
whatever.
across the grade levels. So,
We need to choose.
we need to choose, or if there's additional information that you feel you want for us to collect on these two demographic studies before, then we could do that.
I mean, the scope of service seems very much the same between the two. I think there's sort of, there's one way to bake the cake, right? And having talked to you, said you spoke with.
I spoke with Wellesley on this one.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it doesn't, it seems like you reached out to a substantial number, and, there's not.
Yeah, I don't think, I sent them to I sent the specs out to every demographer in the region that was recommended, or has been used locally.
Have you had similar response and engagement from both firms? Or do you feel like one has been more?
No, it's been similar.
similar.
They both were fairly prompt in turning things around. They both have worked in both smaller and urban districts. You see the second, a lot of their work's been in major systems like Wake County and North Carolina. But I think the scope and I think they're both reputable firms that will do a good job. The biggest difference are price and timeline.
For the timeline, is that, would that be overlaid, or is it 3 to 4 weeks, then 8 to 10 weeks?
I think it's 3 to 4 weeks, and I think they would be overlaid.
Okay.
It looks like we'd have the first one in 3 to 4 weeks, and the second one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it
would
was like
be
one
8 to
and then
10
the other.
weeks.
And then
Yeah, no, that would be really long.
So the outside of this would be 10 weeks.
10 weeks, and
to
this
get
is
both,
6.
And the other is 6.
A month difference.
I mean, I've been looking at this for a long time, so haunts my days. But I appreciate a faster turnaround time. I think
Well, in order to look to modular solutions and know what we're trying to build to, the turnaround time does make a difference.
I'm interested to see we've worked with NASDAQ a couple times, and I'm interested to see how it matches up against what they've provided, not just in numbers, but in the way that they treat the data that they're assessing. But I do think we need some indication of another round of demographic data before we can really legitimately move forward with comparing alternatives. If we have the second proposal that has a quicker timeline on good recommendations from well-respected, other demographers in the field, my inclination is to go with them so that we can keep things moving forward. Is there a potential that we might be, I know we've used NASDAQ a couple times, they've been consistent.
I spoke with NASDAQ, so we could have them update as well at the same time, do an update from NASDAQ and do a new demography study. If we rejoin, we can do the update for very low cost, like $1,500 or something. But what they've told us is that they feel that to really assess the homeschool and the private trends, we would need to do an internal study. They don't feel that they can really predict that right now.
Who would do that? Was that like the town of Norfolk, the school committee?
We would probably, as a group, decide what questions we want to ask, and I would work on
Send out
getting
like
you
a
that
survey to
data.
basically all residents or something like that?
Well, what we do is
Online.
contact, so all of these families that are either homeschool, private, or charter, we have to track. We have to know where they're enrolled, and we have to report out on that. So we have contact for everybody. So we would probably do a question survey, why did you opt to homeschool? Are you ever considering returning to the Norfolk schools? Like, we try to get that and summarize that data for this committee.
But would you also have a way to reach out to like younger families? For instance, my wife and I don't have children yet.
Right.
So I'm like curious, those
For
are
other families, that's a
12,000
good
people
point.
in the town, right?
Yep, we could put out maybe something through the town, too, through the town newsletter,
I
and
think
see
that
if we
might
could
be
get data
a
on
good
families
option.
that don't have kids, yeah.
Almost like that, the master plan survey that
Yeah.
we do a little.
Yep, we could do that.
A quick, short, easy to navigate survey.
Yep, the same, and we could work on that. The other thing that we could do if you wanted to, if we want, I think we need to make a decision fairly soon. We have these proposals, we need to get this going. But if the committee was interested, we could interview the 2 demographers, and we could schedule that like in a quick turnaround time. We can't wait another month, but if you felt that you needed more information, we could consider that as well.
With the previous studies, what do these timelines look to you? Because there's a pretty significant difference between the two. One is 6 weeks and one is
10.
10. That's a month. So is one...
Might be just capacity of the firm too.
Yeah, I'm saying that, that's a good point too, but I was just kind of, because that's a big difference. I mean, the
It
price
is.
there's no significant difference in price?
This one is $16,700, and the second one that's in 6 weeks is $15,000, but they charge $500 for people to come out and present.
If it's a
So-
two visits, or two
visits.
virtual included though. so-
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, at least from my standpoint, like I read through these today, I looked at them again just now, like the methodology seems somewhere in the same ballpark.
Yeah, they
The
are.
cost is somewhere in the same ballpark. You spoke to one, one came recommended, the other one kind of found. I mean, if all things are equal none of us are demographers, I'm assuming.
No.
I mean, the shorter timeline does seem to make more sense.
And I don't.
I think it would help the
necessarily see
And trust me, I'm not the rush it
Yeah.
guy either. I'm just like, if
Yeah.
it's all the same and we could get the data a little sooner,
Well, and we already have something to baseline it against. I mean, we
Right,
will
we
we
have
will
the
know
That
net
helps
it's
too,
wildly
yeah.
off.
Right.
I'm comfortable with that because we've already delayed this a while, and
Sure.
now we have to do the next study, and this committee has to have a recommendation. Whatever we recommend has to go to town meeting and then to the ballot. So I still remain concerned about the need for temporary solutions that are going to be costly and not serve us well. So,
But I do
if
think-
everybody's comfortable, I think that's a reasonable approach.
absolutely. And I think having the backup data of the NASDAQ, sorry, how do you pronounce that?
NASDAQ.
NASDAQ, okay.
New England School Development Council.
Yeah, sorry. And then NASDAQ, and then also whatever our internal town thing, it'd be kind of like
We'll have two
two,
resources.
kind of guides to compare against at least, which, then you're like, okay, the timeline maybe becomes a little less, I don't know what data this extra 4 weeks would necessarily get us, but by having a whole separate situation to kind of baseline it and, go with the quicker one then.
Yeah.
All good?
I agree.
Okay, so I need a motion to move forward with appointing, let me get the right name of the
Proposal
firm.
two,
Hold
good
on. So bringing me 2 proposals. Demographic Analytics Advisors to complete the,
Wait, were they the quicker one, or was it the?
Yeah.
yeah, they're the
Okay, all
quicker
right.
one. The other one was,
It's always on it says proposal 2 on the first one, so
Right,
you
right,
kind
right,
of,
that's it, okay, gotcha.
no, you're right, Madrona.
Yeah, no, because it was the faster timeframe is,
Sorry, it's just with the 2 packs.
It's page 9, right?
the demographic and data science consultant,
Yes.
Christopher Purdick and Ronald
Kribos, yes.
Yes.
Yep. So to appoint them to complete the demographic study.
So moved.
It's because she did it back to back, so the firm name for
so,
the first
okay,
one's
yeah.
on that.
I'll second.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and no one's abstaining? All right, so I will let them know tomorrow that we will want to move forward with them so that they can get the demographic study started. The next thing, as we just started to talk about, is everybody in favor of starting to think about an internal study, reaching out to our current homeschool and private school families, as well as potentially to the town, for families that have kids that will be coming to school, to better understand why they're opting for a private or homeschool, what conditions they might consider coming back, are they currently considering coming back? So at the next meeting, I could come with proposed questions, and we could look at that, and once you approve the questions, we could start that work. Does that feel okay?
Yes.
Can I ask one thing? I don't know how we would do this. It might, or if it's too much, but we might think about going out to, I don't want to go out to everybody in the school system and ask if they're thinking about other options, because you
Yes.
don't want to push that, but like maybe as part of the town survey, you say, I'm currently enrolled and thinking about, or something a little, not so heavy-handed, a little soft touch to say, like, if somebody's considering, you know, I don't know, like leaving the
One
district.
thing that we could provide without asking, like our existing students, if they're considering, we could look at the last 10 years, how many existing students go out. We don't lose as many as new parents that might be choosing, but we could look at that data and decide if we want to explore that further.
And we get notification from families when they are testing out, right? I just got an email about it.
When they're-
because Billy's in 5th grade. It said, if you're taking the test to go to private school, please let us know.
Oh.
So I think.
Never got that.
Maybe I'm special. Maybe they're like, Grace, get out. I was just thinking, because that could change the upper grades.
I mean, we can certainly, we can look at, I can get you the history of how many kids have gone out from in-district and what that's looked like. I mean, there has been more since COVID,
Yep.
so it might be
a
worth
little skewed.
exploring.
Yeah.
We could certainly get that data, and we could certainly put something out to all of our families, like, you know, we could put some questions together that would make sense.
We could also just contextualize what you're asking. It's like, hey,
Yep.
we're trying to figure out how we're going to best serve the town. If you know, do we need to expand? And obviously, hopefully people won't kind of start to try to game it and be like, oh, we're not sending anyone to the school, you know. But like just adding some type of like non-biased language in there where people are just going to be like, all right, like, we just want to know. We're trying to get
We
gross
could just
numbers.
say,
Like, it's not,
I could say we're
yeah.
in preparation for our building project. We're trying to understand our enrollment trends.
Yeah.
Is your child your child's currently enrolled in what grade? Have you considered homeschooling? Have you considered private school placing? Do you anticipate your child will be returning to the Norfolk schools in '25? Like, we could do a very brief.
Just like that.
Kind of thing for our existing students, if that makes sense. So why don't I bring for the next meeting proposed questions for both surveys, for our current students and for, that we would use in, what we'll probably do is call our homeschool families in the private schools and ask the questions, because when you send a survey out to people that aren't with you, we're not going to have a good response rate. So but I'll bring the drafts and we can finalize that. I will reach out to the demographer, and then we can get started with thinking about the modular, like, plans. Troy, I'm thinking you're probably going to want the updated demographics before you go too far with that.
That's the key. That's the key information. for
Right,
sure.
so it's a
Yep.
6-week turnaround once we get started. So probably maybe week 5 or 6, we'll start to think about bringing you back in
Yep.
and getting that work underway.
That sounds
That
great.
sound good?
Are the modular items, and again, maybe I'm just not, when I'm thinking modular, I'm thinking, and I know I briefly spoke to you about this, but I'm thinking a nicer version of a trailer, basically, right? Like, because when I grew up in New Jersey, the school had like its speech class in one of those. Is it not just like a per unit cost? Like it's like one unit is this many kids, and then if you just go up or down based on the number of kids you're trying to house.
So we're going to look at the evaluation of the modulars in a few different ways. You can just buy trailers. They won't last very long, and it will certainly be a very temporary solution. Now, that being said, we have gone into districts 30 years later, and they're still in modulars. It probably shouldn't have been, but still in modulars. However, we'll look at different levels of modular construction, 3 different levels specifically, and related to the construction itself and the quality of construction, essentially, the longevity of the construction, the HVAC, the systems, and the levels of systems that would be installed, the structure of the modulars themselves, and the foundations, and how we can change the foundations based on what the budget and outcome is, like whether it's a full foundation, whether it's piers, and what the base construction is for the modulars. The modules themselves will be organized in a way that they typically come in 14 feet wide by 42 feet or 66 feet. And it's essentially what you can legally fit on a road, right? So those will be the modules that come in, and they will essentially stack and create what the organization of the building is. And so it's a little bit more complex than that, but simplifying it down to the individual modules and the 3 levels of construction finishes and systems and structure. That's what we'll be going through as far as an analysis. How does it fit on the site? What's the organization on the site? What will actually fit on the site, meaning the square footage in the back of the building here? How much land do we have to clear, need to clear, in order to fit the modular construction? Can we attach it to the existing building in one location, both locations? Whether it's a single story or 2 stories, it gets a little bit more complex with 2 stories, as you can imagine, inserting stairs, elevators for ADA accessibility and just general accessibility. So those are the things that we'll be discussing as far as once we get the enrollments, we'll be able to look at exactly how many modules will be needed, how many spaces will be needed, and then how many modules will be needed, and the sizes.
And then once you get to that point,
and
then
the
you're
other
able
pieces there.
to provide
And site prep
examples
too,
of
because we have to have septic and bring things in.
some of the
too,
districts
so.
that have incorporated those different types of solutions.
Yeah, we did a study for the city of Fall River for their entire special education, district-wide special education program. And then in Watertown, they're constructing a new high school. As part of the new high school construction, because of the size of the site, we designed an entire high school, 2-story temporary high school, for them to move into temporarily while the construction of the new school is occurring. They'll go back to they'll go into the new high school once it's complete, and they'll demolish the temporary modular building. That's a 2-story building. So
Buy that used?
what's that? Yeah, right. But I mean, that will be a discussion too, as far as just like you said, are you leasing, are you buying, and availability of potential modules, and what's the availability, and what's the level of construction, and what's the cost? Like those examples will be part of the conversation too.
And I think in the scope, as you said, we would look for like a basic price, a moderate price, and so 3 different tiers of materials and costs.
Yeah. And we'll also go back and refine the cost based on what we had previously done
Yes.
to have an apples-to-apples comparison.
Yeah.
For a cost comparison between
Yeah.
all of the options to get a sense of how they stack up.
Against each other.
Between each other,
Yeah, and if we see significant changes in the studies, the potential of reducing the scope
Right.
of size, square footage of this. So we'll look at all four of those, and then I think the goal of this committee is to choose the best option to bring forward
Sure. And
to the town.
Would the same logic apply for the, base, better, best for the actual construction? Like, obviously I'm looking here, this is a pretty nice
This was
library, it's beautiful.
halfway funded by MSBA.
But
so, yeah.
exactly, like versus if this was to be like a bare bones, I'm not looking to make it look like a prison cell.
Yeah, yeah.
But like, do we have different options when it comes to the architecture?
Yeah.
Or, the new building, I guess.
So I would say that I don't necessarily think there are several options, but there's an average cost per square foot that is used for construction of similar buildings and similar fit out of schools, elementary schools, that is used, and you can move the needle a little
Yeah,
bit.
so I'm thinking the finishings and,
But yeah.
the quality of, it's like, do there need to be mahogany desks or whatever, or is it going to be, like that's,
This is
that,
for my
I can
family.
assure you that's not in there.
just, but you understand what I'm getting at, yeah.
I think
So you
if
can-
you move forward with, if you decide based on all of this, you're comparing like the construction, not necessarily the finish. Once we decide that,
Yeah.
a building committee would oversee the construction and make decisions on finishes and spending. So you would have some, like Troy said, some flexibility, but that whole project, just like this whole building, every finish in here was determined by the building committee. And they did do some cost-saving measures. They changed things throughout the process and so that this committee could continue on. I think in the scope of work, we said this committee could continue on, but you would monitor the entire development from start to finish.
It wouldn't be a situation where you would say, okay, here's $800 a square foot is one, $600 a square foot is two, $400 a square foot is three. It just doesn't move.
Like
The
that.
construction cost difference doesn't move that drastically.
Okay.
So that's a little bit more challenging. Even we'll see, even modular construction with the 3 tiers, there's a difference, but we're not cutting the price in half by changing some of the aspects of the building envelope or the systems or the structure. It's incremental adjustments that in some cases make a difference.
I was going to say over 36,000 square feet, $5, $10, $15, $20 up or down.
That can
Makes a big difference, especially when you go to the town and say, hey, we need to spend X. Let's pretend if it was going to be, 50 million versus 35 million. That's a pretty big difference for the townspeople to vote on, you know what I mean? So that's just
Yeah.
got to put it
Yep.
out there and ask.
The one
And what we,
upside
you're probably going to
of-
say.
of not working with MSBA, while we're not getting half of it paid for, is that we do have a lot more independence and latitude in how we want to scope out whatever solution we choose. MSBA has some very strict guidelines that you have to adhere to. Like, for example, I think they have standards with,
Energy
minimum
efficiency.
energy efficiency, minimum square footage for a classroom has to, without deviation, be X under all circumstances. You can't sort of flex and adapt to individual needs because you're building based upon kind of a state formula that you have to adhere to if you want to see the reimbursement on the project. So while it would be nice to have half of it paid for, there's greater flexibility in operating independently of
good.
grant funding that way.
And the other thing is, once we decide on whatever solution is going to be, the next phase of the work is the architectural design and schematic design. So through that process, the design process, you make some of those decisions, and we talked about bidding this out before we even went to town meeting. So you would have a final cost. Sure. So
Like the fire
through the
station.
schematic design, like the fire station, you might say, all right, well, we want to change the space, we want to change the flooring, we want to change these things. And that happens in the design phase of whatever option we choose. And then the recommendation was to bid it and have a final number so that there's no, like when you go into building, you know this is what it's going to cost. And you have a contingency fund for unexpected costs, but that's all managed by the building committee. So.
And that is one of the benefits of the approval process that we're developing here.
Right.
Is the ability to make that adjustment before costs come in.
Yeah.
In an effort, a global effort to reduce the cost as much as possible.
Yeah. And just,
Whereas this is an estimate, a range. We would
That's
be
right.
going with, this project's going to cost $33,105, and that would be it. That would be the cost.
and just kind of another thing to go off of something you said earlier. So when you said, I forgot, was Boca or something, when other...
FICO?
The co-op
FICO.
situation.
Yep.
Is it a possibility, I don't know if this is a building committee thing or this is a school committee thing, but with the thought of whatever space we design, making it available for maybe some kind of cost offsetting in the long run. Obviously, you're not going to recoup your whole, situation off of something like that. But if there's going to be an art thing, maybe you have community art sessions or something like that available to go make pottery, like things that you can integrate into the plan. But again, that's I know it's getting a little bit far afield, but again,
We do. What I would say is we do now rent the Freeman Kennedy space. We rent the gym. We rent the H Olive Day, and we have a facilities rental account, and we use the revenue generated for that for maintenance costs. So yes, once you design, it wouldn't really offset the project costs, but
no,
it could
definitely not.
support
But
the maintenance
support
of the
because
space.
once
Yeah.
you build this expansion, there's going to be more teachers, going to be
Right.
more this, going
Yeah.
to like more places to heat and
Yep.
provide power to.
So we do rent those spaces, and we do use it for like security upgrades or maintenance problems or gym floor refinishing. So you would have potential for that.
Just when you mentioned Watertown, that just triggered another question, which I don't believe was covered in any of the material. But in the previous surveys, was displacement cost or the impact to students, existing students, factored in or assessed?
When we're talking about the addition, we were talking about building under occupancy. So because it would be, this building would remain, so we wouldn't have like Watertown where they had to move the students to construct. It makes it more difficult in phasing the construction, but it would be an occupied build if we went with that model.
I believe there were when this was built, I think the old building had.
It was still there.
That makes sense.
I
Yeah.
believe that it was.
It was
yes,
occupied.
It was
While
demolished
this was
after,
being
because
built.
I know we had
I
an
remember
unexpected
when
bill
it
for
was, yeah.
asbestos found during
Yeah.
the demolition, so, yeah. But this would be this design is an
So
occupied build.
this would be
so
much
we wouldn't
closer
have a
than when they
displacement.
put this structure up sort of
Yep.
across the
Yep.
parking lot, kind of from where the old one was. But,
Right.
I mean, it would essentially be through these windows where the
We'd
construction
probably
was
have to
happening.
temporarily reroute traffic and some things like that, but it would be done during.
And there'll be a few summers where utility work or work inside the building would occur, or exterior utility work to prep for the addition or the modulars or whatever the solution is would need to occur.
That work would not shut down the fields, right? I mean, because this is, even in the summer, there's people everywhere around
Well, that's
here.
all rec.
fields
We
is
don't have a
out,
right
yeah.
to park our construction trucks.
Okay, perfect. So
there.
that's still available to the town, because I could see like a big,
All the fields will go away.
oh, yeah, well,
Yeah.
you can tell the kids.
At indoor softball right now, the fields will be open. Right.
No, it's completely opposite. Those would not be
That would
impacted
not be
whatsoever.
touched, so that'd
Yeah.
be open all summer while there's
Yeah.
this, figured. I have a baseball player, I have to ask you.
All right, so then the last thing for tonight, again, we moved it because we wanted to wait till everybody's here, but the committee needs to elect a chair, and the chair, whoever you elect as chair, would work with me around establishing the agenda, would run the meetings, handle discussion, plan for, next steps. So anybody interested in serving as the chair?
Are you eligible to serve as the chair?
I don't think I am.
I'm assuming
I will
you're
help
not.
whoever wants
Yeah,
to
no,
be the chair.
Before I just came
But
out and
no.
nominated you, I wanted to have myself.
and I don't
so
think
that you may
Justin
not be-
either.
He can't do it either,
No.
yeah.
Anyone?
I mean, I can do it if, Grace,
Grace also, well, I would be happy to, I think, number one, she would do a great job. But in addition to which, the school committee sends members to this committee. That's myself and Grace. Grace has the longest runway of time left on the school committee of anyone.
Yeah.
on the
Well,
school
me and
committee.
Lauren.
Well, you and
Yeah.
Lauren. Yeah, I mean, she was elected last spring, so I
Right.
think that does give you
So I have 2 more years of...
more than enough time
Yeah.
to do that, so the timing works out.
As long as you'll help me, I'm happy to do it.
All right. Anybody else interested, or we want to?
Do I get to use the gavel? That might change.
So we would have to make a recommendation. So I'm looking for a nomination for chair.
I move to nominate Grace Lockhead as chair of the Norfolk School Building Committee.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Chair.
There you go.
abstain.
At the next meeting, we can elect a vice chair. So that'll be the next. So think about who might want to be the vice chair at the meeting in case Grace is absent. And we will go from there. All right. So motion to adjourn the first meeting of the building subcommittee. Before we go, Matt, I forgot you're in the background. Matt Malnarch is our facilities director for the schools in town. He will be part of the building committee in an advisory capacity, so not a voting member, but will be here to answer questions as we're looking at options. Questions about site, anything like that. He's worked closely with AI3 through the feasibility, and the other member will be Bob Bullock from the town, also as a non-voting advisory member, building inspector. So he will be here hopefully at the next meeting.
And for the record, I think Matt knows every inch of both buildings more extensively and intimately than anybody else possibly.
Definitely can answer questions that I will not be able to. So he'll be a great add to the team. All right, great. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Have a great night, everybody, and thank you.